The war in Afghanistan may be over, but its impact on a generation of warfighters will be felt for years to come. Afghanistan is an ancient land that has seen countless wars. It is shrouded in Islamic and tribal lore and myth that has been passed down through generations. During the war, soldiers witnessed strange activities that defied explanation, including sightings of giant humanoids, UFOs/UAPs, and paranormal activity on the battlefield. This documentary presents several anonymous accounts of high strangeness witnessed by soldiers in Afghanistan. Perhaps there is an explanation for these phenomena, or perhaps not. Regardless, these are the stories of those who left their disbelief behind in Afghanistan. Giants have been a part of the myths and legends of almost every culture for centuries. These massive humanoids are believed to have existed long before humans. One such story is the legend of the Giant of Kandahar, made famous by Art Bell's Coast to Coast AM. According to the story, a special forces team encounters a giant, red-headed man with 6 fingers on each hand and double rows of teeth. These details are also shared by many other stories and accounts of giants from dozens of cultures throughout history. In my opinion, this story seems too convenient and too Hollywood. It appears to have been conjured up with a limited understanding of special operations and military jargon. Nonetheless, we cannot entirely dismiss the possibility that some aspects of the story may be true. There are several accounts of soldiers who claim to have seen massive humanoids towering over the average person in Afghanistan. Although these stories are rare, they do exist. It is plausible that few soldiers would come forward and admit to seeing a massive man roaming around the mountains of Afghanistan. However, we cannot rule out the possibility that something colossal and unknown exists out there. In 2002, a squad of U.S. Army soldiers went missing in a remote desert area of Afghanistan. A special ops task force was deployed to investigate, and they eventually arrived at a large cave. After walking along a rugged, mountainous trail, they found scattered pieces of broken U.S. military equipment and gear in the clearing outside the cave. As they were about to enter the cave to explore it, a 12 to 15 foot tall, red-headed humanoid creature emerged and attacked them. The giant impaled one of the soldiers, known as Dan, with a huge spear and attacked the rest of the squad. It took 30 seconds of continuous fire from full-auto M4 carbines to take down the giant and save the squad. Upon examining the creature's body, they discovered that it had double rows of teeth and 6 fingers on each limb, with sharp claws. The creature's body was airlifted by a helicopter and taken to the squad's base, from where it was loaded onto an aircraft and taken away. It has never been seen again. During my deployment as an infantry team leader in the Kunar Province of Afghanistan from 2008 to 2009, we undertook an observation patrol to keep an eye on a village that we suspected was the source of IEDs. My lieutenant handed me the Recon 3, a new thermal imaging system, and instructed me to test its capabilities and share my findings with the other team leaders. I spent most of my time exploring its different functionalities and watching the village. As I looked across the valley, I noticed a large heat signature at the top of a false peak. I tried to get a clearer image using the thermal imaging system, and to my surprise, the heat signature stood up as one being. The creature was at least as tall as the tree surrounding it and was moving quickly with ease. It covered a lot of distance in a short amount of time, and I lost sight of it along a neighboring spur. Initially, I kept what I had seen to myself, assuming it was just my imagination. However, in 2010, while listening to a story on Coast to Coast, I heard about the Giant of Kandahar. This brought back memories of my time in service and made me recall other strange things that I had seen during my deployment. The creature was described as having fire orange hair, which reminded me of a local tradition where people would dye their hair in goats a bright orange color. They never provided an explanation for this practice, and it was always followed by the disappearance of the goats and the dye. I now wonder if this was a gesture to the creature or if the goats were sacrificed to it. As a Christian, I was reminded of the men of renown mentioned in the Bible, also known as the Nephilim. I believe that what I saw was a member of an ancient race of giants descended from fallen angels, or it could be something like Sasquatch, but I'm not certain. As a sensor operator on the Reaper, I recall a time when I was heading to work in the northern parts of the country for a task. While scanning the area, I noticed some small villages up high in the central mountains, which I had scanned many times before. However, this time, I stumbled upon something unusual. I saw a super small mud hut, and what appeared to be giants. These giants were approximately 3 to 4 meters tall and as wide as the crosshair of my ruler tool. The mud huts in the area were quite basic, just mounds with some holes for windows and doors. The The giants were just going about their daily routines, tending to fires and doing other chores. There were a few goats tied up and one person tending to the fire. They were wearing rugged clothing, similar to Afghan tradition, and heavily cloaked. The only remarkable thing about them was their size. The goats looked tiny next to them. I monitored them for only 10 minutes before we were too far away to see. It was mid-wave IR at night, so they showed up as black humanoid heat signatures. I wish I could have used our daytime camera to see more details, like if they had red hair. From 2012 to 2018, I worked as an FMV analyst. During that time, we were conducting a pre-OP soak NE of Karengal, gathering patterns of life on almost every person there. One day, while observing a group of people around a fire, we kept a lookout for any possible weapons. After about 20 minutes, two figures that were initially huddled together under a blanket stood up. One of them was much taller than the rest, at least 8 to 9 feet, and walked over to a mud hut. The figure was so tall that he had to bend over to get into the hut. I couldn't tell whether or not he had red hair since we were observing in infrared. Nonetheless, he was a colossal and imposing figure among the rest. During my time as an LT in the Australian Army, I was deployed to Kunar Province. One early morning, while I was on piquet, known as security or sentry to Americans, in my LAV, I used a thermal imager to scan across the valley for any potential threats. That's when I saw something unusual, a large human-like figure, which didn't look like the typical Afghan clothing. Although the figure appeared to be a person, it was lankier than usual. The distance was too far to see much detail through the TI, but I could see it from the chest/armpits up. I decided to confirm the distance by lasing the compound walls a few times, which gave me a good return. I estimated it to be around 500-600 m away, but as I did a more detailed scan, I realized that it was further away than I thought. It was also unusual to see individual people out at that time of night. Using the LRF to get the range, I was shocked to see that it was 1800 m away. The figure didn't seem to be in any hurry and I followed it for about 5 minutes before it went out of my FOV. It appeared to be just walking, not in a hurry, but aware of what was happening around it. It kept looking around, especially near the compounds. I couldn't identify what it was, but it stood at least 12 feet tall. I have never told anyone about it before, but it has stayed with me over all these years.